Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's IIF ESG webinar, our first one of July. We hope you're all staying healthy and safe. Joining us for today's discussion is Giel Lindhorst, who is Director of Energy, Sustainability and Infrastructure at Guidehouse. And Giel is also Executive Director for PCAF, which stands for Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. I will open with a few quick questions for Giel, after which he'll tell us more about PCAF's initiative to launch a global carbon accounting standard covering harmonized methodologies for various asset classes. After his presentation, there'll be a Q&A session where you can submit questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can while sticking to our half-hour format. Two logistical notes just to keep in mind. First of all, this discussion's on the record. Press is in attendance, and a video recording of the event will be posted on our website shortly after the event. Also, questions are via the Q&A prompt at the bottom of the screen, but unfortunately, if you're dialing in by phone, we can't get questions from you. So let's just dive right in, and perhaps first you could tell us about how you're doing, where you are in lockdown, where you're broadcasting from today.
Yeah, thanks, Sonja. Nice to be on this webinar. Yeah, I'm based in the Netherlands, and actually the Netherlands today had a new phase of the lockdown, so we are softening the policies and are, you could say, almost out of full lockdown. We still need to keep social distancing, but we are allowed to travel and kids go to school, so we're really opening up, which is really pleasant.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. Not quite as good news here in the States.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. But then perhaps maybe you can give us a sense of what PCAF is all about. How did you get started? What your goals and initiatives are?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And in this webinar, we'll dive into the details. But actually, 5 years ago, PCAF started here in the Netherlands. And now it really went global. And we see finance emissions, measuring finance emissions as a key step. And in this webinar, I will explain more how finance emissions will link to all other initiatives out there, and also how it connects to taking action, you could say.
And maybe just one last clarification before you start the webinar, which might be helpful for some who are listening. When you say financed emissions, maybe you can clarify what you mean by that and how it fits into the carbon accounting scheme of things.
Yeah, so financed emissions is really related to the emissions associated to loans and investments. So to quantify in a harmonized way the impact of loans and investments from a climate lens. So what are the emissions related to a business loan, to a motor vehicle loan, to listed equity or bond, and to really quantify that in a harmonized way in line with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. That's the key, and to do that annually, connecting to your financial reporting. That's the goal of measuring finance emissions.
So all the way down the lending and credit extension supply chain then. Excellent. Yeah. Well, sounds really easy. I'm sure you will take us all through this in your presentation.
Yeah.
So please.
Yeah, I will share it. Yeah. So in the coming minutes, I will tell you more about assessing finance emissions in lending and investment portfolios. And actually, we see a growing interest in this initiative, which is called the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. This is a globally growing initiative led by the financial industry. And why is there a growing interest? Because we see that more and more financial institutions want to contribute to the green recovery out of COVID, but also want to contribute in line with the Paris Agreement. They want to take responsibility and want to align their financial flows with Paris Agreement goals to come to a low carbon, but also more resilient society. That was already in the Paris Agreement, but we see also more and more financial institutions taking new steps in this space. Also, regulators and supervisors are putting more and more pressure on financial institutions to assess risks and also have more transparently disclose where the risks are and how they contribute to the opportunities that come from this transition. But also we see more and more interest due to a push from clients, from customers that ask about what the impact is of their money, their saving, and how that has been spent, or their pensions. So we see growing interest globally to come to a consistent way of measuring finance emissions. So the link between emissions and the loans and investments in a portfolio of a financial institution. And measuring finance emissions is also the first step for a financial institution in his journey to assess risks, but also to set targets. For instance, if you want to assess the climate-related risks in line with the TCFD, and focusing especially on the transitional risks, you need to measure emissions. Because simply multiplying the emissions by a carbon price already gives you an indication of climate-related costs that could occur with your companies in your portfolio. So doing that risk assessment, doing those scenario analysis, you need to understand what's in your portfolio and what is the related emissions to those loans and investments. Also, to set targets, you need to measure emissions. Most of the methods being developed by the Science-Based Targets Initiative are emission-based methods. Also, to take action, you need to measure. If you are engaging with companies in your portfolio, you want to understand the impact of those engagement efforts, and you want to understand the emission reduction that occurs at the company levels. So you need to also assess those emissions. And also for reporting, emission accounting, measuring finance emissions is important. The TCFD requires to disclose metrics like absolute emissions or emission intensities, but also the recent update of the CDP Financial Service Questionnaire has incorporated questions on finance emissions. So we see finance emissions, measuring finance emissions as a first step to any journey a financial institution wants to take. If you look at the Paris alignment journey and all the initiatives out there, also finance emissions is a first step in any journey. You need to understand what is the emissions related to the loans and investments in my portfolio. You need to disclose that in order to set targets and to develop a strategy to meet those goals. And for those components, you need additional tools and data, like forward-looking data. But that type of tools and data comes into the next step after you have assessed where the emissions are in your portfolio and where you want to take actions to align your portfolio with the Paris Agreement. And in the end, also the impact of actions and monitoring if those actions are in line with the Paris Agreement, you need to measure emissions. So PCAF is really at the beginning of any journey of a financial institution in Paris alignment or assessing risks. However, at the global scale, there's no harmonized and transparent approach yet. If you look at what financial institutions are doing, and this is clearly assessed by UNPRI and also UNFI, financial institutions are using various methods and also are using various metrics to disclose on their emissions. So it's currently not harmonized, and that leads also to less transparency. So that's why a group of financial institutions decided to partner and assess emissions in a harmonized way, to develop methods that can be used by any financial institution to measure finance emissions. So it started 5 years ago, as I said, in the Netherlands. Currently 80 members in the Netherlands have joined PCAF to contribute to harmonization of these methods. In 2018, it was picked up by Amalgamated Bank in North America to lead a North American group to bring the methods developed by the Dutch group to North America. And actually last year, funded by Hewlett Foundation, a global initiative was started. And this global initiative aims to cover in total more than 250 financial institutions. Currently, we are at about 65 financial institutions spread over all regions. And PCAF has two goals. It's an initiative that runs for in total 3 years. One important goal is to really come to a harmonized global standard on measuring finance emissions. And we think if that standard is there and picked up by a critical mass of financial institutions, then it could live on its own. Same like the Greenhouse Gas Protocol for corporates, for companies that's out there for many years and is the standard used by financial institutions, and also the standard that is integrated into the TCFD is integrated into regulation as well as the standard for reporting on emissions of companies. And we see PCAF and the PCAF Global Carbon Accounting Standard in the same way. We want to establish this standard, come with an updated version as well next year, and then we believe with critical mass, this standard could live on its own. I will dive a bit more into how to measure emissions and how to assess data quality. So PCAF started in 2015 developing methods for several asset classes. In the beginning, they covered 5 asset classes. In the years following, they added more. As we are an industry-led initiative, they decide as a group which asset classes are most relevant for them. Over time, they develop methods for in total 10 asset classes. There are several reports out there that cover methods for these asset classes. These are developed by the Dutch and the North American mainly. So this was great input for the development at the global scale of the global standard. So taking the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which forms the basis for also the North American and the Dutch work, and the work done by those groups, a global core team has started to develop the Global Carbon Accounting Standard. I'm really happy to announce that within 3 weeks, we will launch the first draft version of this global standard for public consultation. And the global core team has decided to integrate 6 asset classes into this global carbon accounting standard. That is mortgages, commercial real estate, business loans, project finance, listed equity and bonds, and motor vehicle loans. So those 6 asset classes will be covered in the global standard. And we aim to have it officially reviewed by WRI to also get the stamp of the Built on Greenhouse Gas Protocol mark. So that process, that official review process, will go in parallel to the public consultation process. We aim to launch the final version of the standard at the London City Summit in collaboration with in November. So in November, in the second week of November, at that summit, we'll launch the first version of that standard. But the work continues, and we probably add additional asset classes to the next version of the standard as well. In the standard, you will find detailed accounting rules for those 6 asset classes. But in basic, the method is building on these equations. So as said, carbon accounting is accounting finance emissions, so measuring the emissions related to loans and investment at a fixed point in time linked to your financial reporting. So if you are doing your financial reporting, assessing your balance sheet at the end of the year, linked to your financial reporting cycle, then you also connect emissions data to that. and you report on the emissions linked to those loans and investments in your balance sheet. And that mainly comes to the following equation, where you look at the emissions in the real economy, so the emissions of companies, of buildings, of projects, that could also be projects investing in forest. You assess the emissions or the avoided emissions or the sequestered emissions related to those activities, and you attribute that to you as a financial institution based on a fair share. So the outstanding amount divided by the equity and debt is kind of the basic rules how to attribute the emissions of the investees, the borrowers and the investees, you could say, to you as a financial institution. And PCAF is not only for banks, these rules account for all those asset classes which are also for investors. Here's a few of the details. I won't dive into all, but PCAF has defined specific accounting rules for each asset class, looking at key principles, accounting principles that are already set by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So for each of these asset classes, accounting rules are decided upon by the industry itself. And in some cases also the group decided to take 100% attribution because, for instance, for a mortgage or for a motor vehicle loan, often the financial institution is a sole provider of that loan. So they decided to take 100% of the emissions of a mortgage and as well as a vehicle into their account, into their carbon account, you could say. What is important to PCAF is next to methods, has developed a data quality scoring system. Data quality is important because we know that data availability and data quality differs globally. So PCAF has developed with its core team data quality scoring from 1 to 5, where 5 is really low quality data. You could say very limited information available to do the assessment, so you mainly use sector average data from global databases. But with the aim to, especially when it's important for your overall portfolio, to increase the data quality. So PCAF members collectively work together to increase the data quality up to level 1, where the data often comes directly from the clients. And that is mainly done for parts that come with high emissions or are relevant to the financial institution to aim for better quality data. And scoring combined with the emission estimate can enable financial institutions to develop improvement strategies. So both banks and investors use this system to highlight where the emissions are and where data quality is poor, so they can develop strategies to improve that data that is important to them. And now a few examples of how this system has been implemented. And as said, within PCAF, the Dutch group has started this and has been implementing this for over the last years for over 1 trillion of their assets. So there's quite some experience already out there in the market, and also the North American team has been applying these methods to their loans and investments. I'd like to share one example of a leading sustainable bank in the Netherlands, Triodos Bank, that has applied these methods to their full loan and investment portfolio. And we see some of the financial institutions starting with certain parts of their portfolio. In the beginning, Triodos Bank also started with a subset of their portfolio, but also increasing the coverage over time. And recently, they covered 100% of the asset classes that are provided with methods by PCAF. So they covered all types of loans to companies, but also they measured the emissions sequestered by their investments into forestry. And also their investments into renewable energy are measured where they do the accounting linked to avoided emissions. So here you see on the right-hand side, the report put out by Triodos Bank, where you see their balance sheet, you see the total outstanding loans and the funds that they invest in. But you see also the emissions. So the attributed emissions using the attribution accounting rules from PCAF, the absolute emissions that are linked to that, also the emission intensities. But you also see the weighted data quality score for all these clients in their portfolio. And that scoring also enables them to improve data where it's relevant, where there is high emissions and they want to improve the data to get to a more accurate number, in order also to better understand the risks related to those loans and investment, but also to help those clients to transition and contribute to their transition to a low carbon economy. One nice example is a recent report that was published by the Dutch Central Bureau of Statistics. By collaborating, the Dutch banks collaborated with the governmental agencies, but also with the grid operators to connect actual energy consumption of the houses linked to their mortgages and link the energy consumption to their mortgage book. And CBS has assessed the emissions for their mortgage portfolio by linking this data set on actual energy consumption measured by the grid operators to their portfolio. And this is a strong case to show also that collaboration of financial institution, you can, by collaborating, you can also work together with governmental agencies and other actors to get access to this type of data. Because the issue is not that the data is not there, it's not made available to you as a financial institution. So by collaborating, it's also, it makes it possible also for governmental agencies to collaborate with you, because if you were an individual financial institution asking for this type of data, you wouldn't get access to it. But as a collective and make it a common good, then the government decided to collaborate and make this data available. And this enables these financial institutions to steer their portfolio more and more in line with the Paris Agreement. So getting actual data, getting more data quality, better data quality, helps them to steer even better. I'd like to finalize with some words on the organizational structure of PCAF and how you can participate in this process. As said, PCAF is currently 65 members and we like to grow to 250 participants. It's free to join. It's a structure where we have regional teams. Teams come together on a quarterly basis and sometimes even at a more active level. It's governed by a steering committee, which is led by 5 institutions. That's ABN AMRO, ASN Bank, Triodos Bank, Global Alliance Banking on Values, and Amalgamated Bank. So they form the steering committee. We run the secretariat. I'm heading the secretariat. And there's this core team, which is formed by institutions part of the network that developed this global standard. So we have this regional structure where financial institutions come together, both the banks, investors, asset owners, asset managers. Any financial institution can join this initiative and contribute to the discussion. And we see also that there is interest to start up PCAF at a national level, because collaborating at the national level, working together to get access to better data, to also have policies, to link PCAF to certain policy that is relevant to collaborate on a local level. So there is an interest to start up a PCAF in Denmark. Danske Bank recently joined and is thinking about exploring PCAF in the Nordics, but also in South Africa. FirstRand is active to establish a PCAF South Africa. Final words, PCAF is collaborating at the regional level, quarterly meetings, and by sharing experience, you all help to get more acquainted with doing this type of measurement, but you also get access to the database. PCAF has developed an open source database that is accessible for all participants, and this data is a very good start to start measuring emissions. It has over 3 million data points, emission factors for all types of asset classes, for business loans, for buildings, for real estate and mortgages. There's also all types of emission factors. Finally, PCAF has a commitment letter if you are interested to join. There's a commitment letter to sign up, and you commit to assess and disclose the emissions within a period of 3 years. We don't put requirements on what coverage you should have of your loans and portfolio, so you could just start with a certain part of your portfolio, but with the aim to increase the coverage of the finance emissions covered of your portfolio. And of course, by meeting at a quarterly basis, you can share your experience and learn from the network. So we welcome you to join PCAF and contribute to the further development. And we open up for your questions. Thank you.
Oh, that's great, Giel. Thank you very much. We do have a number of questions. I wanted to start with a very practical one. And first, the questioner says congratulations on a great initiative, and wonders whether there will be a tool made available to participants. Is there a tool available for use?
Yeah, so PCAF participants get access to this database, which is owned by PCAF members. So if we work with a financial institution in Japan, for instance, and better data comes available through that collaboration, then that data is integrated into the database. So also the other PCAF members, the other PCAF participants can benefit from data improvements done by the network. And the database enables financial institutions to do this accounting, to really start with the accounting. And when you join, we onboard new financial institutions, and we have workshops to run them through the database.
Great. And a couple of questions on scope. One is around sovereign bonds. What kind of interest is there for including that in the next standard if it's not included in this first iteration? And the second is around to what extent you're integrated with the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI.
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, so sovereign bonds is really important. We have had many questions on including sovereign bonds. I think that will definitely be included in the next version of the standard, so at the end of next year. As you've seen, and I mentioned, sovereign debt, sovereign bonds was already a method developed by the Dutch team. And we will take that work into the global core team for the next version. And yeah, you could say that PCAF carbon accounting standard feeds into all types of reporting platforms, GRI, SASB, because it's the greenhouse gas, you could say it's the greenhouse gas protocol extension for financial institutions, when it's also stamped with the built on greenhouse gas protocol mark. In that sense, it feeds into all the other initiatives and reporting standards frameworks out there.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a number of other questions, but I assume that there are contact details on the PCAF website where people can get in touch and give you these questions. So with that, I think I will thank you for being here today. A really informative presentation, and we look forward to hearing more about PCAF and your initiatives ahead. So thank you very much.
Yeah, please thank you. Please watch out for the launch of the global standard in about 3 weeks. We hope to hear your feedback on that draft version so we can finalize that in November. So thanks for joining.